Hey everyone, welcome to Staying Connected, supporting your students through virtual music. We are really excited to have you today. Karissa and Victoria and myself are excited that you're here as we dive into the unknown of working from home and other alternative classroom scenarios that inevitably create challenges for both our students and ourselves. In the Orff way, I thought we would start with a little bit of a poem. Welcome, my friends. We're glad you're here today. We hope that you're ready to wonder, think, and learn. In most Orff classrooms, this would instead be sing and dance and play, as I learned from Joyce Stefanski, my level 1 Orff teacher and mentor. But today, it's a little different. We're definitely doing a lot of wondering, thinking, and learning as we are thrown into the world of online learning. Perhaps you are expected to create live lessons for your students, or perhaps you're providing only things on paper. Some of us have been asked to assess students virtually. Some of us have been asked to teach live classes. Some schools provide Wi-Fi hotspots and iPads so all students have the opportunity to engage and learn. Others have immense inequities that are left unaddressed. Some students have a quiet workspace at home and plenty of time to work and grow, while some students have barriers to learning at home, whether it be a younger sibling they are expected to take care of, or a struggle ensuring there's food for lunch. From decolonizing the music room to music educators creating online learning, we are so fortunate to have groups and networks that help us grow and push ourselves to be better teachers, and to be honest, better humans in this ever-changing landscape. Today, we hope to offer just a little bit of insight into what's been working for us. Through this discussion and this conversation, we hope to spark a light bulb moment, a connection to something that will work for you and your students. There is no one solution here, but if we hold our students up and bring some happiness and some love, and of course, some music, then we're making a meaningful and powerful difference. Before we begin, I just want to mention a few things. Please keep yourself muted and your video off during the webinar, and we appreciate your cooperation with that. Feel free to use the chat. You can use it to talk with one another. Do you have a question? Great. Ask it whenever it pops into your head, and we'll get to as many of them as we can at the end during the Q&A. There's so much information here, and we have only a little bit of time. So do you want to see it again? Fortunately, you can. We'll email the slides afterward, as well as the full webinar is being recorded, so don't worry. With that, let's jump in as we discuss our own mindset and considerations outside virtual music and distance learning. I'm honored to start by introducing my friend, Anne. Anne Mileski is an elementary music teacher specialist in Eastern Washington. She is certified in Orff Schulwerk, Kodaly pedagogy, Smithsonian Folkways World Music, Music Learning Theory, Level 1, and has completed coursework in Dalcroze Eurythmics. She is a regular clinician and has presented at both the American Orff Schulwerk Association and Organization of American Kodaly Educators national conferences. In the summers, she has served as a pedagogy instructor for Kodaly teacher education programs. Anne holds a Bachelor of Music in Trumpet Performance from the University of Michigan and a Master of Music degree in Trumpet Performance from Southern Methodist University. Prior to relocating to the Pacific Northwest, she completed coursework toward a doctorate in music education at Indiana University. While at IU, she served as an associate instructor for methods courses, supervised student teachers, and conducted second and third grade singers in the IU Children's Choir. Anne currently serves as a conductor for the Spokane Area Youth Chorus and founded the ABC Early Childhood Program for Young Singers through SAYC. She is the founder of anacoustic.com and the Anacoustic podcast, where she helps music teachers get more intentional with their teaching through trainings, custom curriculum, and weekly podcasts. Anne, I'm so glad you're here, and take it away.
Thank you so much, Matthew. I'm so excited to see so many of you, and I think I speak for my fellow hosts when I say that this has been such a wonderful response, and we're so glad that you guys are here and we're in community with one another. So thank you for taking time out of your insanely busy day, even more busy, even though you might be at home than what we're probably typically used to with this whole learning curve and all of the changes in our world that are going on. So today I want to start by just kind of setting the stage for a lot of the things that we're going to talk about. And if I could go ahead and get my slides, there we go. But we're going to go ahead and begin by thinking about where you are right now. And this is hilarious, and Victoria will laugh because our friend Beth Silliman, Beth, if you're here, hello, joked when I said this because we're all at home, right? Everybody's at home, but I'm really talking about where are you in your teaching? Because I realized as I started to talk to my community that there are so many teachers across our world, and for as many different teachers as there are in our world, we're in many different teaching situations as it comes to distance learning, digital learning, you know, enrichment, whatever you want to call it. So before starting anything new in terms of exploring this new concept to most of us of digital learning, I think it's really important to identify where you are and where you want to go. And this might seem fluffy, but I honestly think it's important to take time, especially in this current climate, to really reflect on where you are and what your mission is as you move forward. So we're going to take a couple of minutes just to do that today. So the very first person that you might identify with is Radio Silent Rhonda. And I should say before I talk about Radio Silent Rhonda that I've noticed in the community that there are typically about 3 different avatars, if you will, or different personalities that people seem to be identifying with. And what's funny is that 2 weeks ago, you might have identified with one of these, and then today you might be identifying with a completely different one. And to be real, in 2 weeks, it might be something totally different. So again, like I said, this might seem a little bit fluffy, but I think it's really important that we think about these things because it's constantly changing. So Radio Silent Rhonda is a teacher who's told not to teach or have contact with students at this time. So if you are one of those teachers who right off the bat, your school was ready to rock and roll with digital learning, you might not realize that there's a lot of places like where I live where since it's not equitable, as of right now, there aren't the resources available for students to do digital learning widely across the board. We're asked not to. And so they're saying since it's not equitable, you can't provide this new learning, and there's just not a lot of opportunity for contact. And if you're in that position, you might feel really, really sad because you had great plans for the year, you had a lot of really neat vision for what was going to happen in your music room, and then that all just kind of went away. And to be honest with you, that could really throw you into a place of mourning in addition to everything else that's going on in our world, right? Somebody else you might identify with is Baby Steps Betty. And Baby Steps Betty, oh, I should mention, let me go back. Rhonda, you might also be Ricky. There's more than one option there. Okay, so Baby Steps Betty, you might also be Baby Steps Bobby. And this is the teacher who is told to offer only enrichment or resources without new instruction, okay? And if you are in this position, you might have really mixed emotions. On one hand, you might be grateful that you don't have to throw everything up into like a digital workspace, right? You don't have to learn all of the specifics about the remote, the distance, or the different style of learnings that it seems like a lot of our other colleagues had to learn in like 48 hours with no notice and no extra training. But on the other hand, you might still kind of feel some of that mourning or a little bit kind of like I was really excited. I want to keep working with my students. Like, what do I even do? So you might only be allowed to take those tiniest steps toward continued learning. And last but not least, you might be in full out Franny mode or Frankie mode, who is the teacher who's expected to continue instruction like it's business as usual, except everything's totally different, right? So this is kind of the BANANAS, Gwen Stefani, all that kind of stuff, because it's just totally different. And you have to transfer everything online. And for something that we do that is so based in community and so based on what's happening and reacting in real time, observing constantly what our students are doing and how they're making music, it's probably felt very, very frustrating to you, not only in terms of what your kids are able to do through this distance medium, but also for yourself, because a big proponent of mine is feeling like a hashtag teacher musician. So we became music teachers because we want to bring music to the world, and we want to bring music to the world by teaching kids. And so it just so happens that we need to make sure that we're staying true to our musical selves too. And that might feel really, really difficult for us. I know it does for me through a computer screen. So right now in the chat, I would love to know which one you most identify with right now at this point in time. And you can put a 1, you can put the name, you can put something different if you're feeling like it, if I didn't touch on the person that you're identifying with. Maybe you feel like Radio Silent Rhonda or Ricky. Maybe you feel like Baby Steps Betty or Bobby. Maybe you feel like Full Out Franny or Frankie. Whichever one it is, these are all valid. There's a place for all of this. And you're going to go through these different stages probably as time is going on. I have a lot of colleagues that I know of who started out in the Full Out Franny or Frankie, and then they were asked to pull back because they just had to make adjustments constantly for families or students and that equity piece and all that kind of stuff. I've had people who started out Radio Silent Rhonda or Ricky, and then now they're being asked, since it's very obvious that we're kind of in this for a little bit, that they need to be offering more. Okay, so what I want you to do, no matter how you identified, is to go ahead and take a breath, and I'll do that too. And just realize, honestly and truly, you're doing amazing things, and you need to give yourself a lot of grace, because no one expected you to learn to become a music teacher overnight. And besides, you don't have to completely change everything you've ever done in the music classroom to fit into this new situation that you've been given. And even though it seems like you do, because it's so brand new and it's starting to become more known just by necessity, you don't have to just totally flip the script from what you used to do in your classroom. And I think a lot of us have been feeling that, and that's where a lot of the stress is coming from. Okay, so here are the 2 choices as I see it. Agree with me or disagree, but you can focus on the digital aspect and how to make it musical, or you can focus on the music aspect and how to make it digital. Because we are not digital music teachers. We are music teachers who just so happen to be teaching digitally. And I think there is a huge difference between the 2. Because if we get so caught up, and I mean, this is not just, I mean, you're here because you need these resources and we want to teach digitally, and because we have to reach our students in that way right now. But if you're so caught up in making sure that you have all of this tech stuff in place instead of focusing on the music making, we're not those digital teachers, we're music teachers. So please, please, please keep that in mind. Okay, so here's just some questions I want you to think about as you're going through the presentation today, as you're planning your lessons, all of that good stuff. Number 1, what is your intention for your planning? Number 2, how do you approach it, whether you're in a physical classroom or a digital classroom? Will you be approaching it differently? And should you be treating the 2 differently? And if so, how? Okay. So let's get into a little bit of like the nuts and bolts. All right. So here are some resources for you if you have not been able to have contact with your students in the way that you, as closely as you normally would. So if you're not the Full Out Franny, if you're more the Radio Silent Rhonda or Baby Steps Betty, and you're allowed to kind of have that enrichment conversation or just reach out connection with your students, this is something that I did with my youth chorus kiddos, because we aren't having rehearsals, we aren't having virtual rehearsals, but I sent them a letter to let them know that I'm thinking of them. And then I also gave them some ideas for things that they can do at home to keep engaging with music. Okay, and then what I did was the very last one, if you look at number 5 on that letter there, it says recite our BB Bumblebee rhyme. These are 5 and 6-year-olds. BB Bumblebee rhyme and play the game with someone from home. Okay, because they know a fun elimination game where somebody gets out. And then if you say and play our BB Bumblebee rhyme, you can use the worksheets I've included to practice beat and rhythm and ta and TT. And this is actually something that we've done in class before. Okay, so it's not brand new to them. It's still enrichment because it gets them making music at home, which is really, really important in this time, but they can do it pretty independently. Okay, so the important thing if you're going to do something like this is to let your students know that you miss them, inspire them to make music while they are at home. And if you notice, there's a couple of them, or most of them, that they don't need to have adult supervision really to do, right? Like they don't have to have an adult who knows how to read music in order to make it happen. So they can sing a song from choir for a grown-up, something that they know really, really well from our last concert. They can make up a brand new instrument and then talk about how it makes sound, just something that gets them thinking musically. Also make suggestions for ways that they can be musical that are low pressure, and make a suggestion that highlights something familiar that can reinforce learning you've done in your classroom and serve as a point of advocacy. Because if you have your kids, and I'll just go ahead and show you, do something like this at home, and they can do it totally independently, you're gonna have parents who are just like, holy cow, right? Like there's kind of a hidden advantage here if parents and families have time to be with their students, because it's crazy town. But if you have a kid who sits down and says, hey, look, like I figured out what the rhythms were and I colored them and I can do this rhyme and I can keep a steady beat and I can keep the rhythm, like parents are going to be all over that, right? So this is exactly what I sent them. So they know the BB Bumblebee rhyme. It's simple enough that most parents could probably pick up on this, right? Because it's not sung, it has that advantage to it. And then, like I said, those two activities are things that we did in our class, okay? The other thing I want to talk about really briefly before I pass it on to our next friend here is streamlining your planning. So regardless of how you are teaching kids, whether you're doing it in a physical space or a digital classroom, I really want you to think about what your intention for planning is. So for me, I always follow a lesson structure, or I call it a lesson flow, because it stays very, very flexible that way. And I choose behavioral objectives that anchor my lesson flow. So don't freak out when I show you this, but this is my lesson flow regardless of how I'm teaching. Okay, and so I have an opening routine. I have some song material, so we go through some songs, keep a steady beat, keep the rhythm. And then I have my major behavioral objective, a relaxation moment where students get a little bit of a brain break, for lack of a better way to highlight that. And then a minor behavioral objective, and then a closing routine. But my major and minor behavioral objective, the reason I'm showing you this is because they anchor everything else that happens in the lesson, no matter how I'm teaching. Okay, whether it's in a physical classroom or a digital classroom, having those objectives, having that intention, okay? The third thing I always make sure I'm doing is selecting meaningful songs and activities that serve my objectives. And then the fourth thing is daily assessment based off of student I can statements or learning targets. So even if we're in a digital classroom, I'm going to do something where my students can say at the end of the lesson, oh, I can do this activity in Seesaw to show Ta and Titi. I can do this Google Classroom assignment. I can follow my teacher on his class video doing this instrument activity, whatever it might be, something that they can still acknowledge that there's a piece of learning going on, even if you're not in real time with them. Okay, if you want to know more about this, I actually just wrapped up a free challenge for folks inside of my Facebook group, and it's actually closed, but I kept the materials live for you guys. So if you go to annakarissa.com/webinar, and you'll get this in the notes, but you can access all of the materials, and I talk about all of this stuff much more in depth, so you can go and check that out. Okay, so that's all I have for today. It was kind of fast and furious because, like Matthew said, we have a pretty short amount of time here today, and I want to be respectful of my colleagues' time. But you can find me at the Anna Karissa podcast wherever you listen to podcasts, or you can go to annakarissa.com and find it there. Every Thursday, there's a new podcast live, so there'll be one tomorrow. You can also join my Facebook group called Anna Karissa Insiders, and I do things like that free challenge I mentioned. I do lots of live video, offer free resources, all that good stuff. And then last but not least, right now I actually have a planning program that's open because folks who had already been in it had told me that it's actually been helping them plan their digital lessons. So I wasn't planning to open it because it's kind of a tricky time right now, but registration is open. So if you want more information about that, that's available as well. And then last but not least, I have to share something a little bit fun. These are my two love bugs. One might make an appearance because she's napping right now, just to be real. So later she might make an appearance. But these are my little girls who I'm quarantined with. My husband is a healthcare worker. He's not in the hospitals, but he's working very long hours to help alleviate some pressure in the emergency room. So he is here when he can be, but most of the time it's three girls holding down the fort. So just thought I'd share that, hopefully make you smile, because I know a lot of you guys are having that same very real lived experience right now. So without further ado, I'm gonna pass things off to Karissa. So I'm gonna stop my screen here and say that Charissa Duncanson, AKA Music with Mrs. Dunk, is in her 6th year of teaching K through 5th grade music for Dearborn Public Schools. Born and raised in Michigan, woo woo, Karissa began her musical journey in elementary school. Throughout her childhood, Karissa participated in choirs, bands, and theater within her community and schools. She earned a Bachelor of Music and Vocal Education from Wayne State University and currently teaches at McDonald Elementary School in Dearborn. At McDonald Elementary, she directs her school choir, the McDonald Madrigals, and also is the director of the McDonald Arabic Drumming Ensemble. Karissa is in her 4th year of directing the Dearborn Public Schools District Honors Choir, which features the top 4th and 5th grade singers within the district. As a professional, Karissa has performed and presented throughout the Metro Detroit area, ranging from state conferences to local PD workshops. Ms. Duncanson has kept close ties with the music education program at Wayne State University and works with future music educators, inviting them into her classroom as well as bringing her students to the university campus every year. Being an avid advocate for music education, Ms. Duncanson has served on the board for the Detroit Orff Schulwerk Association and is currently serving on the AOSA National Board Social Media Committee. Karissa also serves as a regional representative for the Michigan Music Educators Association, communicating the needs of her teachers in her region to the MMEA board. So without further ado, I'm happy to pass things off to Karissa.
Thank you, Anne. And thank you, Anne, for helping us figure out who we are and who we're gonna be. And because I definitely am one of those who I'm like, today I'm her, but now I don't know who that was. So thank you so much for that. All right, so welcome everyone. I'm so glad that you're here. I'm going to kind of be discussing Google Hangouts and Google Hangouts Meet and just kind of showing you how I utilize this software as a tool to connect with my students virtually. So what is Google Hangouts Meet and what is Hangouts? What's the difference? So Google Hangout is Google's longest running message and video chat service that is free for anyone with a Gmail account. And then Google Hangouts Meet, or I'm just gonna call it Meet, and that's what Google is now switching and referring to it as, is a paid Google software tool provided as part of G Suite. So if your district uses Gmail for your emails and messaging, you have the G Suite series. All right, so Meet is similar to Hangouts, but it has additional features, and these include real-time captions, which are great for students who maybe don't speak English or who are having issues with technology and their sound isn't working. They have real-life captions. It's a free video conferencing like what we're doing here on Zoom. There are free chats, similar also to what you guys are utilizing here, and it supports up to 250 live participants. Okay, so today we are going to work on 3 things with Google Meet. We're going to figure out how to create a Meet event link to host a live music or video class. We are going to discuss what your students will need to have a successful Meet lesson. And then we are going to go over some teacher tips for you as the teacher to create a Meet lesson. All right, so how to create a Meet link. You're going to do this by going into your Google Calendar, selecting a date, and naming your event, and then picking a time for your class. So also a great thing that you can do is you can repeat this event just like you would any other class or event. And then like if you wanted to have your online lesson meet every week, you can do that as well. The next thing you're going to do is click on add rooms, locations, or conferencing. And when you do this, Google will automatically generate a Hangout link here. A feature that I really love that Google also does is it generates a phone number for students who might not have access to live webcasts. So if you have a child who doesn't, Miss, I don't have a camera, I don't have all that, they can call in and still partake in your Hangout lesson, in your Meet lesson rather. Before you leave, make sure you hit save and you're good to go. The third step is to test your Hangout space by clicking that link that was in Google Calendar. When you do that, it's going to look like this when you log in. You will be the main screen. It should be you. And on the right bar, you have 2 tabs. You have the people who are in the chat as well as the chat box for texting or messaging. And again, when you're in the space, it should only be you when you're testing. All right, the last thing is to share that link from your Google Calendar with your parents and students. I've been using Class Dojo and Google Classroom to get my link to my students, but you can use whatever medium your district is enforcing or asking you guys to use, whether it be email or whatever way you are communicating. Just a reminder too, this link can be reused. So anytime you're meeting with your 3rd graders or your 3rd graders from Mr. Bro's class or whatever, you can reuse that link for that same class. All right, so what do your kids need? If your students are using a tablet or iPad, they will need to download the Hangouts Meet app. It is free, but if they are on a tablet, they need to be on the app. If they're on a computer or desktop, students should be able to access this your Hangout session from the link that you directly sent them. A little note, this is the icon for Meets. It's different than the quotations for Hangouts. So it's a different app. Just keep that in mind. What else will your students need? They will need to learn how to mute and unmute themselves. So the students can do this by bringing their cursor to the bottom of their screen, and it will bring up this toolbar at the bottom with these 3 icons at the center. You have your microphone, the hang up, and the video. So in order to mute, all students will need to do is click on their microphone and turn it red, and then they're muted. Oh, sorry. They can also hit the space bar to mute and unmute themselves. Yeah, but what if they don't mute themselves? It's real life, folks, and that's a thing. Thankfully, you as the teacher can mute them. When you are in your live meet, on the right-hand side where those 2 tabs were, you click on the people who are in the conversation, and right underneath by the student's name, you can select that image of the microphone and mute them yourself. So yeah, you can always mute your students. But I encourage you to have your students practice and take ownership of that skill. What else will they need? Students will need to learn how to pin the teacher. Okay, so just like a lot of other live chat rooms and video chat rooms, the person who's speaking is the face that is the biggest. So with Meets, in order to avoid students constantly interchanging and having one big changing face to face, if you're trying to give a demonstration, you want all of them to be focused on you. They can learn how to pin you as the teacher. They do this by hovering their cursor or their finger over your video and selecting that pin button. And then they can chime in and still talk, and you will still be that main image. All right, what else will students benefit from? I have found that my students really benefited from a virtual classroom rules. Now, this is a list that my students and I came up with, so it wasn't just me, it was them. Like I talked with you, we talked about the importance of muting and unmuting and how to do this. We talked about how it's important to pin the teacher when the teacher is doing a demonstration. We talked about the importance of participating by listening and watching. It's kind of a unique way to be involved in music, but it's important in this style of learning. I talked to them about how if I call on them, then that's their chance to hit their spacebar and unmute, or tap that unmute button and speak and share. And then they all want to just talk and shout out and have questions, so I encourage them to use the message chat box on the right-hand side of their screen. And then, of course, be respectful and have fun. All right, so tips for you as the teacher. You can, as the teacher, present your screen. You can do this. Oh, sorry, let me just back it up. Before you present, you have to make sure students are unpinned, unpin you. If they have you pinned, they will not be able to see what you are sharing. So make sure they have unpinned you before you present your screen. So on that bottom toolbar, like with the microphone and hang up and video option, all the way to the right is the present now button. Also, I will just quickly add the caption link is right here, or the caption button is right here as well. So you just click on the present now, then your screen should look like this. And voila, you are presenting. You can present anything on your browser or your computer, like Google Slides, flip charts, PowerPoints, Word documents, images, videos, etc. Another tip is to record your Meet lessons. You can do this, again, by going to that bottom toolbar and selecting the 3 dots all the way to the right, which is your More Options button. These options will pop up, and the very first one is Record Meeting. It will ask for your consent, and of course, click Accept, and then yay, you're recording. So where is this being stored? Where does this recorded lesson go? Google will automatically create a folder named Meet Recordings in your Google Drive. And each recording will be saved as the event title you gave for each Hangout, along with the date and time of the recording. For example, if you named your class Music Example Class, it would say that name, the year, the month, the day, and the time. And these are all saved as MP4s. You can then share this link of each recorded lesson with the students who were unable to attend your Meet lesson, or you could share that link with your administrator and say, hey, this is what we've been doing in music class virtually. You can also use Meet as a recording tool for pre-recorded lessons. Let's say you have a book that you have in Google Slides and you want students to see the images of the picture book, but that you want them to also see and hear you telling the story. You can record yourself in a Hangout, or in a Meet rather, doing both. You can also pre-record lessons that use a PowerPoint visual, or any other thing that you are trying to present from your desktop or browser. This is an example of me telling one of my favorite books, The Pout Pout Fish. And as you can see, it has me telling the story and the image clearly. So let's review. With Google Meet, you can create a Google event to generate a Meet link. You can reuse these links for future classes. This Google Meets provides your students the chance to experience e-learning in real time or live. You can record yourself presenting a book or slide presentation for pre-recorded lessons. You can record your live Meet lessons, and you can share these links of recorded lessons with students who may have missed your Meet lesson. So why do I Google Meet? I Google Meet because I want to give my students a chance to see me live and interact and create with each other in these weird circumstances that we are in. I also have a goal that my students I want them to know that I'm still here and I'm still their music teacher, even in this crazy. I'm still here for them. And right now I'm more concerned about the social and emotional learning of my students, which Google Meet has allowed me to see them and interact with them and just goof off and play and create with them. So that is why I Google Meet. That is all I have for today. Thank you guys so much for listening to my little adventure on Google Meets and meeting with my students virtually. You can find me on these websites and social media, and you will have access to this slide. I think I saw somebody ask that question, to be able to reach out to all of us. And what am I doing? What am I doing to keep myself sane? I am trying my best to continue to create music and have fun and go outside every day. So that is kind of what I am doing. And I am going to stop myself here so that I can introduce Matthew and let him kind of share some of the things that he has planned for you guys. All right, so.
Thank you, Karissa.
Yeah, of course. All right, so Matthew Stensrud is an award-winning and internationally acclaimed elementary music and movement teacher, and currently teaches preschool through 4th grade music and movement at Sidwell Friends Lower School in Washington, D.C. Matthew received his Master of Music Education from George Mason University and Bachelor of Music Education from the University of Cincinnati College Conservatory of Music, where he studied with the renowned Orff educator, Renee Boyer. Matthew is an Orff Schulwerk approved teacher educator of movement and currently teaches movement levels at the Portland Orff course in Portland, Oregon. He also serves on the editorial board of the Orff Echo, the quarterly journal of the American Orff Schulwerk Association, and was a key content contributor of the book Responsive Classroom for Music, Art, PE, and Other Special Areas. More recently, Matthew was recognized with the American Center for Elemental Music and Movement Spotlight Award and was his school's Teacher of the Year in 2017. Matthew presents frequently at schools, districts, and state conferences, Orff and Kodaly chapters, and national conferences, and loves sharing with and learning from fellow music educators. You may know him as Mr. S, as you can find him as Mr. S. Orff across all social media on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and Patreon. Let's welcome Matthew.
Thanks, Karissa. First of all, I should say I'm blown away by all the valuable information that you, as well as Anne, have shared with us so far. So thank you, and thanks again for that. So I'm going to talk with you a little bit today about how you can make a great video for your students come to life. I promise it's easier than you think, but there are still some steps that we should cover. First, consider how you set up your space. Students find comfort in the familiar. And we know that if we set up a space that's much like the classroom, then they're going to already have the same feelings of ease and joy that they have when they come to music each day. So as you see the space behind me, it looks a little bit like my classroom. I brought home a bunch of instruments and materials. I even hung up some posters on the wall to help make the space look and feel like my classroom. That includes rhythmic building bricks so I can make things. It includes an egg shaker, because if you know me, I always carry an egg shaker around. And it includes a fan, because who doesn't want to have a beautiful blue fan like this in the classroom? Because you never know when it might come in handy. Some other things to consider. Bean bags. I always use the bean bags with my students too, so that's another thing I want to make sure that I have in my space. Also remember, it only matters if it's on camera. So if I pan a little bit this way and that way and I see exercise weights or other things, that's totally fine. Really, just what matters is the space right behind me. Think about a space that also has the right lighting. You don't want any windows behind you, but you can have windows in front of you, behind the computer, or behind whatever recording device that you're using. You can also use a desk lamp for a ring light. That can be really helpful and project more light onto your face for an affordable price, or something you might already have in your space. Next, when lesson planning, my suggestion is to keep it simple. I create a template and I follow that same template every day in the lessons that I'm making with my students virtually with my pre-recorded videos. For example, I start with a song. I have a little bit of a dance party. Who doesn't like a good dance party? I then move to an in-depth activity and end with a what if question. Any friends of mine know that I love to ask the question, what if? Which is really just a chance for a learning extension for the students. You'll also know that I just use the same lesson planning book that I have when I'm regular planning. And I talk about a song, a dance, an activity, and a learning extension in the 4 blocks of my lesson plan booklet, which also just makes me feel a little bit more comfortable when I'm planning. Second, feel free to use previously learned material. As we're navigating this, especially the first few lessons, and the students are getting used to all of the new things when learning virtually, use songs and activities they've done before. And then perhaps as you feel comfortable and the students feel comfortable, you can move into a couple new things. So when it comes to making your video, consider using your iPhone. I find that it has the highest quality, but here are a few things to keep in mind. One of the first videos I made, I got a phone call in the middle of it. And because my phone was on silent, I didn't even notice it until I was done recording the video and then realized it stopped halfway through. So if someone's gonna FaceTime you or call you, put your phone on airplane mode, and then that way it won't happen when you're making your video. I then drop it to my Mac, so it's an easy edit process and happens quickly. And I always recommend a tripod, so then you have a steady place for your phone or any other sort of device that you have to be placed. If you make mistakes when you're recording your video, that's okay. Mistakes are normal, and it's actually pretty fun for students too. There was one time when I had some books, as you can see here, fall while I was making the video. I decided to keep it in. That's okay. And it can be fun for the students as well. I also suggest starting and ending with consistency. If I start with a simple wave and a smile, and then get into what I'm talking about, it makes the editing process a lot easier. It's also nice for the students to have those opening routines, as Anne talked about earlier, that they're going to be used to seeing the same thing every time. Finally, imagine the students are there with you. The expressions you make, the pauses that you have when you ask questions, will actually lead to responses from the students. You'd be surprised how many parents reach out to me after I make a video, and they'll say that their kids are calling back as if they were in the classroom with me. That wouldn't happen if I didn't have those pauses though built in. So you're gonna wanna make sure that you leave space for that, as odd as it might seem when you're recording. Tips when editing your video. So you'll see here a lot of edit tips that we're going to cover in a moment because I'm going to head into iMovie. You'll want to have a nice introduction and ending. You can reuse the same project once you get a template made because that saves some time and space. You can split clips. We can use picture-in-picture effects. And finally, when you export it, you can use a lower quality. So let's hop into iMovie and talk about what some of those things looks like. So I'm here in iMovie now and have some clips that I made. You'll see here an introduction template, an audio recording that I made of myself playing the xylophone, and a lesson that I happened to split into 2 parts when I made it, as well as my dance party in the middle. So what are the things that needs to happen to make that successful? First, I come over here to make it a little bit bigger so I can see what actually is happening. As I'm scrolling along, you'll notice I enter the space and I start waving. That's when I can take a quick moment to click and split the clip. Once I do that, I can delete the part at the beginning and voila, my introduction's ready. To split the clip, I just have to right click. So make sure when you right click, when you get to that spot, I scroll down to the same spot at the end when I get up and leave. Then I have a dance party. And all I do now is add a little transition. So you'll see there are some spots at the top for titles, backgrounds, and transitions. I add a spin in transition by dragging and dropping. And now I have a cool way to move between the two. I can do a spin out afterward. And then I had my little dance party. The same thing can happen here where I can splice the clips at the end by finding the spot where I want to make that happen, holding down, right clicking, splitting the clip, and deleting. I do the same thing at the end, and voila, I'm done. Once I do that with the clips, I head back to the beginning. Here, I just took a title. You'll see, a background. You'll see there's lots of choices for a background. So I just dragged one in, and you can make it as long as you want. And then I took a title and drag the title across. And it says music with Mr. S. And if you want to change it, you can double click over here and change it to whatever you would like. Next, I didn't want just a silent introduction, I wanted some music. So I took a recording of myself playing the xylophone, but I just have it facing the carpet here. So what do I need to do? All I have to do is detach the audio, and then I have the audio separated from the clip. I'll move it over here and attach it to the title. Delete, expand to about the same length. And then I have an introduction, music with Mr. S, with my music playing, and I go straight into my video. A nice little way to make a professional introduction, but really surprisingly easy to do. Also, you might want to think about a picture in a picture. That might happen if you have an image that you would like to put in. So for example, in the story of Peter and the Wolf, when I talk about the violin, I wanted to have an image of that. So if I want to have a picture-in-picture effect, let's get some media for us to use. Here I have a media picture from Very, Very Busy, Spinning Her Web, the story Very Busy Spider by Eric Carle. I drag that down. Let's say this is the part of the story where I talk about the rhythmic piece. If I do it like that, it's just going to cut away, which isn't super helpful. Instead, I click from cutaway down to picture-in-picture, and you'll see here a handy-dandy little box. I like to use the zoom feature because I think it's pretty fun to see it zoom in and out. A little border, and voila. Crop to fill is the last choice I want to make in this cropping space. I choose fit because that way it covers the whole thing and it doesn't do the iMovie feature where you'll see where the pictures start to slide one direction or another. That happens because it's always set on the Ken Burns effect, defaulting to that. So you're going to want to change it to fit or cropping it perhaps if you want to crop it. And then as I'm sliding across now in my video, the picture-to-picture effect will come in and then it'll come back out, which will be pretty cool. So that's a little bit about how we make a picture-to-picture come to life. Okay. When I'm exporting my video with my picture-to-picture and all of my files and my introduction, when I'm finished, I go over here to the right corner and click export. Now, if I'm going to put them onto YouTube, that can work really nicely, but I find that exporting directly to YouTube creates some challenges. So instead, I suggest exporting as a file. That way you get to help decide a few of the things. So I choose a resolution that's pretty low, and I choose a quality that's medium. Why? Because we're in a hurry, and if we're making 5 videos a day and it takes 45 minutes to export the video, we're not really helping our students out. And you'll notice if I change the resolution, it now becomes a 1 gigabyte file as opposed to a 382 megabyte file. Then when I export it, it'll come to my desktop. After it appears on my desktop, then I upload it to YouTube. Because I can then choose those export qualities, I find that it makes it a lot easier when I'm uploading. If you go directly to YouTube using this spot here or Vimeo or anything else, I find that it takes quite a bit longer. So that tells us a little bit about how we can edit our video. So finally, I'm going to talk with you a little bit about what happens after that. I've exported to a lot of different devices and found that YouTube is the quickest and easiest for me. And I know that when we're making a number of videos, that's always what we're looking for. When I upload the video, I choose the unlisted portion. That means that I can embed the video using a URL, but it's not private, which means I have to directly share it with someone. I also check the option made for kids. That turns off the comments, and that makes it a lot easier then. So then students, if for some reason they're accessing it, they don't have the ability to write comments anywhere. Oops. When I move it then to Google Slides, I like to make a little bit of a presentation for the students in a Google Slide format. When I'm in Google Slides, all I have to do is go to the insert option you'll see there, and then click video. I then find the URL and paste it in. That way, it looks like this. I set up a 3-page template in Google Slides. It starts with a music message, and then it has an embedded video, so then the students never have to access YouTube directly. It's an unlisted link, but because you embedded it there, anyone and everyone can see it. And then the third is an extension of our learning. A quick question: select an instrument and use the 3 facts that you've learned, and then share that in the music activity in Seesaw. Because I set up a template, I also find that it makes it quite a bit easier. I copy and paste the template in Google Slides, and then all I have to do is edit the message a little bit at the beginning, edit the extension at the end, as well as embed a new video in the middle. And voila, I have a 3-page Google Slides that I can then send along to my students. So I hope this was a helpful little tidbit into what we can offer our students through virtual learning and distance experiences by making pre-recorded videos. If you haven't checked out my videos yet, you can definitely head over to my YouTube page. I try to post some distance learning lessons publicly there for teachers who might be interested in seeing the different activities that I'm using with my students. And those videos you see, I'm actually using with my students this week. So it's pretty cool then to know that those are the same activities that I'm exploring with hundreds of kids in my school. You'll also see here an Instagram and Facebook page. I love to work with teachers on social media and would love to connect with you there. And then finally, I also have a Patreon page. If you're interested in one-on-one discussions or exclusive video content or written lesson plans like you see there, then I would love if you join me there. If you want to check out all of these things, I have one link at the bottom, campsite.bio/Mr. S. Orff, where you can stay in touch with me using all of these different features. So, how am I keeping sane? Well, of course, I love a dance party. You might have seen me dancing earlier today, in fact, to a little bit of Whitney Houston. And whenever I get stressed, which I know happens quite a bit in the current environment that we're in, I take a moment to dance. So I think you should do the same. So, what happens after you make the video for your students? How can you collect student feedback in a meaningful way? I'm honored to pass this on to Victoria Boler as she takes us through Seesaw. Okay, Victoria, we're excited to welcome you here today. Victoria is an elementary general music educator and curriculum designer. In addition to general music, Victoria has taught orchestra, choir, and percussion ensembles. In an administrative role, Victoria has served as fine arts coordinator, leading band, orchestra, choir, general music, and musical theater at the programmatic level. Victoria's primary instruments are voice and percussion, and she has earned undergraduate degrees in both instrumental and vocal music education. With her OR certification in all 3 levels, Victoria is currently completing her Master's of Music and her Kodaly training. She publishes general music curriculum and instructional materials at victoriaboler.com, where she serves thousands of educators in their journey to create grounded and artistic music curriculum for their unique teaching scenarios. Victoria, we're so happy to have you here today, and I look forward to learning from you so we can discuss a little bit about that next step with Seesaw.
Great. Thank you so much. I am so excited to be here sharing about how we can support our students through the Seesaw app. This is one of the best applications I've found to meet our unique needs as music educators. So what is the Seesaw app? The Seesaw app is a digital learning portfolio, and it allows students to document their learning in a variety of different ways. It's also a cross-platform application, so it works on all of your Apple or Android or Chromebook or computer devices. So what can we do with it as music educators? It might feel tricky to consider how we can transition our active musicking experiences to the virtual space. This is a framework that I found helpful as I create learning experiences with this application. So we start with musical skills. In music class, we have a set of specific actions that we use when we are musicking. And you can see those here. So which of these actions can we still do in the context of home learning? We can do all of them. The Seesaw app makes it easy for students to upload evidence of their learning in all of these musical skill areas. And I should say here, even if you're not using this application right now, it was helpful for me to realize that every single one of these musical skills that we do in our classrooms, we can still do in a home learning environment. So now we know the actions that we can take. So how do we express those actions? In our classrooms, we also have musical channels that we use when we are musicking. And in many of our classrooms, those might include modes of musicking that you see here. So of these, what can most students facilitate in a home learning environment? Okay, that's still plenty, right? The Seesaw app can support students musicking in each of these media. So now we know what we're going to do and we know how we're going to do it. Now we need to know what we're going to accomplish. And that is where your music curriculum comes in. We don't necessarily need to completely change all of our curriculum. This goes back to what Anne was saying. We would do well to think about how we're going to deliver instruction. And if possible, it would be good to rethink working the feedback loop. And again, the Seesaw app is one of the best platforms I've found, and it's one of the most intuitive to use in this scenario. Okay, so we're moving. How will we know when we have done it? And that is where assessment comes in. Assessment is just information that tells us what to do next by collecting evidence. Seesaw's assessment tools are flexible and comprehensive for music education, so they support student learning through data collection. So even if our method of delivering instruction has changed, we can still do a lot with virtual learning. And again, the Seesaw app is truly one of the best platforms I've found to meet the specific needs of music educators within the parameters of our young student musicians. So with that framework in mind, I would love to share some possibilities for authentic musicking experiences that you can design with the Seesaw app. This application can serve any of the components that we've looked at here today, but I want to highlight literacy, creativity, and evaluation. So let's talk about Seesaw for literacy. Because it uses screen recordings and audio and video, Seesaw is a great way to work literacy skills. And literacy work does not necessarily need to be drill work. I should say that all of the activities I referenced today will be included in the PDF at the end of this call. So you will have access to all of these videos. Let's take an example of something that you might use with some pre-readers. This is something I designed for K1 to trace the melody. When you get this activity from me, you will click Save Activity. And that's going to put it in your library. So I have this activity here and I will assign it to the Staying Connected Zoom call that I have set up. And now we can go check it out in what is very similar to what students would view. This method of giving directions is one of the main reasons I love the Seesaw app. We have directions here with images, we have text, and for students who are either pre-readers or they're not working in their primary language, we also have the option to record our instructions so students can hear it in the teacher's own voice. But we all know those students. Let's imagine the friend that you have in your mind right now who has the pictures of what to do. They have the text of what to do. They have the instructions verbally to know what to do, and they still don't know what to do. The nice thing here is that the Seesaw app lets you give a demonstration using the same template that students will respond with. So students can see you walk step by step. So to the best of our ability right now, it is as close as we can get to walking them and holding their hand through the process of musicking. So when students are ready, they're going to click the Add Response button. And for this specific activity, we're using the pen tool and we're going to use the microphone to record ourselves tracing the high and low sounds. So students will click the microphone tool and their recording might sound something like this. Seesaw up and down in the sky and on the ground. When they are done, they can play their video back to see if they like their work, if they can check their work there. They can also re-record the video, or if they're done, they just submit it to you. Other ideas with literacy here would be to have a rhythm on the board and students identify the song based on how they are audioing, based on how they are inner hearing that rhythm. Something else you can do with people who are reading on the staff would be to consider having them catch your mistake. And then students can use the movement tool to move those note heads around and put them in the correct place. Let's talk about Seesaw for arranging and composing. Now, I've grouped these together because the line between the two can be blurred depending on how much teacher input is involved. So here we have several different ideas. One is vocal exploration, maybe with K1. This is a rhythmic building block idea. And then this is an add a melody arrangement idea. Let's look at Bow Wow Wow. This is an example that you might use maybe around second grade-ish, depending on your curriculum. And to use this, students are using the Move tool on the left-hand side. So students can click these around at any place they want. And then when they're done, you can have them clap the rhythm. You might have them put it on body percussion. You might have them speak it on rhythmic syllables. There's a lot of flexibility here in one application. Let's talk about Seesaw for improvisation. I always want divergent musical thinking to be a part of my curriculum. So I love that Seesaw lets students submit improvised musical products. Here is an example with 4th or 5th grade using the song Sail Away Ladies. So here on the left-hand side, you have a rhythm that students will read or clap. And then where the beats, the steady beats are empty, that's where they would improvise. So a student response might end up being something like reading the rhythm, improvise, reading, improvise. Other fun things that you can do in terms of improvisation would be to improvise a rhyme on body percussion or to improvise more vocal exploration, but this time without the notated element to make it improvisation. Let's talk about Seesaw for assessment because it's really easy to use and it gives us a lot of data. So why data? Why does it matter right now? When I reference assessment, I am not necessarily talking about grades. The purpose of assessment is to get evidence about what students need from us. So here's the deal. When we land in our classrooms again with our students, we will want to know where our feet are. We will want to know where to start as we make up for some of this lost instructional time. Assessment provides measurements of student progress so that we have a better picture of the next steps we need to take. So in other words, we are going to consider assessing now because we don't want to feel as lost later. The Seesaw app serves the music education needs that we have really well because it lets you enter your own skills that you want to track. You can also assign codes as your categories. And this is important because the skills that we use in our standards look very different from our colleagues in the general education classroom. So these are the skills that I've added for the activities I'm sharing with everyone on this call. I have categorized them also by their national core arts standards that they correspond with. And then when it's time to actually assign an evaluation, this is the Seesaw example that we looked at the very beginning of our activities. It takes about like 5 seconds to listen to the student's recording. And then Seesaw lets you assign an evaluation on a scale of 1 to 4, excuse me, so you can keep your standards-based grading. Now, the question next is, what are we going to do with all of this data? This is the skills view in Seesaw, and it lets you see at a glance how students are progressing in each skill area. It also shows you which students haven't completed anything yet. And as we know, that is a challenge that many educators are facing. I do not want to discount that access to this kind of technology is limited for some of our students. All of our students have a right to equal opportunity education, and data can be one of the pieces in our puzzle that serves our students moving forward. So for the students who can show up with this technology, let's serve them and use the data to track their progress so that we know what they need next. For the students who can't show up right now because of a lack of opportunity, let's serve them too by taking data to count them as missing from arts education so that we have a better idea of how to serve them when we finally get to see them again. Okay, that's all well and good, but even though Seesaw can facilitate each of these musical components, it's still a new piece of technology for many of us educators, for many of our parents, and for many of our students. So let's talk about Seesaw in the real world. When you get this PDF, you have clickable links to all of these questions that take you to a full set guideline of how to walk through that issue. I have a passion for writing music curriculum. I don't have a passion for fighting with technology. And if you are like me, when I first started playing around with this application, you might have a lot of questions. So these are the most common questions that I get asked about using this platform for music education. Even though I have some frequently asked questions, I know that's not going to be enough. Working through technology has a learning curve, and that is okay. Luckily, the Seesaw support team has put together one of the most extensive and practical help websites I have ever seen. And that makes sense because it was made by teachers. So the directions are crystal clear and easy to follow. So if you have any questions about getting started with this application, how you use it for your youngest learners, how it can support your ESL families, how you should set it up as a specialist, all of those things you can find on the Seesaw website, and I will help you find those links so you can access those directly. I recognize that the topic of virtual learning is big, and Matthew and Karissa and Anne have done such a beautiful job of sharing their perspectives and what works for their unique teaching scenario. And I am so grateful for them sharing their expertise. I know that I have learned a lot. If you want to continue this conversation, I would love to hear from you. You can find me on Instagram. I am at Victoria Boler. You can also find my writing and some of my curriculum on my website, victoriaboler.com. And I dive more into these curricular resources in a subscription platform on my website called the Planning Finder. How am I keeping sane? Okay, I have 3 sisters and I love each of them very much. We have very recently discovered Marco Polo, and we have been using that app to stay in like constant communication. It has been really wonderful. The other thing is that I really enjoy cooking, and so I've been catching up on all my BA, all my Bon Appetit YouTube videos, and that has been inspiring as well for some of our home cooking here, since we are not going out to restaurants as much. We're bringing the restaurants in. I want to thank you so much for listening. I'm going to hand it back over to Matthew.
Thanks, Victoria. Really helpful. I use Seesaw as well, and all of these ideas were helpful for me too. So I hope people check it out. Thanks again to Karissa and Anne, as well as to everyone who joined us today. I know also though that there have been quite a few questions, as well as some enlightening discussions that have been happening in the chat. And I've really enjoyed following along with that too. So thank you to everyone who's been engaging with us in that forum. That's been really awesome to see. But now though, it's time for a Q&A, which is really exciting. We've got a lot of questions going on in the chat, so I thought we could spend a little bit of time with some of those questions. One question we got from Rachel Lash, asks, what are your opening and closing routines that you're talking about? I know, Anne, you talked a little bit about an opening routine that you use in your lesson planning flow. Can you talk to us a little bit about what that looks like, both in your classroom and if you do something virtually, what that might look like as well?
Sure. Molly, who woke up from her nap, and I would love to tell you guys about that. So what I do is for my opening routine with my itty bitty kids, I always have the same set of like 2 or 3 hello songs. And then we play a fun, I call it the color game. And it's just kind of a silly thing to get us started and get them moving, where if they're wearing, and I sing to a melody, just say, if you're wearing purple, stand up. If you're wearing blue, jump around, and do something to kind of get them physically moving around. And then we repeat our lesson objective. And then we kind of go into whatever our first batch of the day is for that lesson. With my older kids, when I'm in a physical classroom, I usually pick something that is, I apologize for that ambient noise. I usually pick something that is pretty interactive. So like a play party or a folk dance or something that gets them up and moving again as soon as they get into the classroom. So I'd probably do something similar as well. For a digital space, if you're kind of doing that live component to your lessons, or if you're recording videos like Matthew does, there's no reason that you can't keep that same opening routine. And as Matthew mentioned, I think that's a really, really great source of comfort for them, right? You know, if you welcome them into your music space, whatever that looks like in your world right now for your kids. And then for closing routines, it's going to depend. For me, that's usually my opportunity for kids to do a quick assessment. I think that the way that Victoria explained would be a great way to do that. You could also do a quick self-assessment where you just check in and have them do a little finger talk with like thumbs up, thumbs down about what your learning objective was for the day, or, you know, if you have a 1, 2, 3, or 4 scale, or whatever your process is for self-assessment usually in your classroom. I think trying to keep as much normalcy as possible is really essential in this time, because those kids need that routine and they need that security. And so if you can provide that in some way, shape, or form, it's special for them.
Thank you, Anne. That's really helpful. Another question that we have was talking a little bit about Google Meets and the length of your lessons. The question is, how long are your Google lessons and what do you include in them? So I thought, Karissa, you could help us out a little bit with this one. And then I'll also share right before that she gets started that each lesson that I make is about 10 minutes long. There's a little introduction song that's maybe 2 or 3 minutes, a little dance party of 30 or 45 seconds, and then maybe perhaps 5 to 7 minutes of an in-depth activity with that movement space in the middle, and then a little goodbye that might be 30 seconds. And I think 10 minutes is pretty good before students are going to start to lose a little bit of that engagement. And even then, having the movement in the middle is really helpful for them. Karissa, can you maybe talk with us a little bit about what that looks like in your Google Hangout Meets too? Sure.
So it varies. It depends on how many children have showed up for the meet. I have been meeting with grade level. We talked a little bit about equity, and Google Meets is not everyone has access to this resource. So because of that, I've been meeting with all of my 3rd graders, and I have 3 3rd grade classes, but I had 18 children once was my biggest class. So the time varies on how many students are there. I try to keep a routine as well in these meet sessions. So the first 10 minutes, I'm just checking in with them. Like, some kids will pop in and then their audio doesn't work. So I'm really not doing anything musical. We are just seeing each other, cracking jokes, baby in the background, checking, you know, just kind of checking in. And I literally, when I'm writing out my plan, I kind of plan for that 10 minutes after our meet time is just kind of wiggle room and a check-in time. And then after that, depending on how many children are there, I will go into an activity, whether it be a singing activity where I sing and then I call on and you sing, or I sing, you stay muted, and we all sing together. So the longest I've done is a 40-minute lesson, live lesson, but mind you, 10, sometimes it gets a little bit longer because they pop in and out and we got technical things going on. 10 minutes of that is just check-in and just social. It's just, hey, is that your cat? Like, checking in. So.
It's really helpful, Karissa. Thank you.
Sure.
Another question came from Rebecca, and she had a question about Seesaw that asks, is there a way to use a PDF or a worksheet like that in the background of Seesaw? So it's a virtual worksheet that they can work on through the app. Victoria, can you talk with us about if that's something that's possible for teachers to be doing?
Yes, I would love to. The short answer is yes, you can do that. The long answer is you can also do a lot more. So students can, in a regular, let's say regular classroom scenario, students could take a picture of a worksheet and then they could like write the notation on it, or they could circle your mistake, or they could draw lines to connect themes in a listening activity. Yes. Rebecca, if you just Google Victoria Boler Seesaw YouTube or something like that, you can find a YouTube video I've put together where I walk through how I add a background to those Seesaw activities. Along those same lines, I know this wasn't your question, Rebecca, but I saw it in the chats as well. You can do something very similar with something like Google Slides, where you add an image and then add images on top of that so that students can move them around. So you have some options here. What I hope is that the ideas of flexibility and looking at skills and how we can use different pathways to address musicking could apply to a lot of different platforms as well. Matthew, I don't know, I don't mean to put you on the spot. Did you have a thought around that?
Yeah, absolutely. I have been enjoying using Seesaw activities too, and find that students are really receptive to it. There are a couple of little tidbits that are really helpful to learn that I learned through the Seesaw Ambassador program, which is free. You can do the program for free. It takes about an hour and a half. And if you do the program, they actually give you access to Seesaw Plus, which you would normally have to pay for. So Seesaw is free, but you can only add 10 classes. And then if you become an ambassador through a free training program, you can have up to 25 classes and a few extra features. So that's when I learned things like using icons and other pictures that makes it really helpful for kids to see the images of where they need to click to do different things. So I found that to be really helpful, especially for the PK and K friends. I noticed that Sarah asked a question about PK and K friends, and I'd say something that's worked for me is you can embed your own audio. So I'll write the steps that I want the kids to take and then have an audio of me speaking the steps too. So depending upon if there's a parent or someone with them, they might just click the audio and they could still do it without having to be able to read it. Yeah.
Great.
Awesome. Okay. So we have another question that asks, can students enter a live Google Meet before you are in it? And what are some other things to consider with your students when doing that live? So Karissa, can you kind of just clarify that for us when you have, if you can?
Sure. So this is all new to me as well. And from my experience, when you are the creator of an event, so because I've been creating my links through Google Calendar and then getting those generated links, that meet belongs to me. The meeting cannot begin without me. So students, it's kind of like a waiting space similar to what you were in today. And then if there is an outside, so because my district utilizes G Suites, all of my students can log in with their Gmail, but they don't have to. The pro to students logging in with their Gmail is they're recognized as being within the same server. So they are allowed to just be in that meet space. But let's say a student didn't log in through their Gmail account and used their parents. I have to, as the owner of the meeting space, have to approve or deny them. I also have a student teacher who does not have a district email, and I have to approve her every time she comes in because she is an out of, I'm not sure, there's a specific name for someone who is out of your district or out of your zone. I don't know the word, but so it is quite secure. If I think that's what the question was kind of asking. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think Karissa, Sydney kind of also talked about like, what are the pros and cons of doing a live recorded meet like you do, or the pre-recorded videos that I kind of talked about. So kind of like what led you to do the meets and what's worked well, or maybe any challenges you faced.
Yeah, I'm so worried about my kids, and I know a lot of you guys are too. And I couldn't handle the reality of not seeing them. So it was kind of selfish of me. I knew that I needed to see them, and I really wanted my kids to know, like, hey, yeah, you're not in school and neither am I, but I'm still here. I'm still here in my house singing and banging on things and making music, and I want you guys to know that I care about you. So that's the biggest pro to doing a live lesson. Although I do pre-recorded lessons for my littles, because all this technology is overwhelming and it's hard, and I know that their parents are overwhelmed. And so there are some major pros to creating a YouTube lesson and give it just, hey, moms and dads, click this link and your child can be interacting it with with their teacher. So, but basically my biggest pro for live meets is seeing each other, having that personal experience, because we don't get to do it right now.
Yeah, right. That is really special. And some of the things that you've talked about have kind of led me to explore doing that as well with my kids, I think, over the next few weeks. And fortunately, my school is comfortable with kind of exploring some of the live meetings together, as well as pre-recorded lessons. So perhaps, teachers can explore both of them and see what works best for them, but also it works for your students, because there might be some kids who love the feature of being able to see everyone, and there probably are some kids who could get a little overwhelmed too, and vice versa, that some students can dive really into the pre-recorded lessons, and some students might be missing that kind of one-on-one connection with the teacher who's there and kind of the feedback that they're getting from one another. So yeah, my advice would be to check them both out, or try them both a little bit and see what works best for your own environment. But yeah, thanks, Karissa. There was a question about the major and minor behavioral objectives that Anne kind of talked about at the beginning. Anne, do you mind kind of clarifying a little bit about the differences between that and what that might look like for you?
I might have to stand up to share it with you.
Totally fine, Anne.
This is just real life, y'all. So, so every lesson that I have has at least one main objective that I'm focusing on in terms of, you're going to see my baby and not me, in terms of music literacy and fluency. So with the, let's put her down, see if she's happier there. Sorry about that. So,
look, that's what real life is like. Okay, we're all of us are doing that and working, right?
Right.
So,
the major and minor behavioral objectives are the focus for each and every lesson that I have. So whatever concept I'm exploring with my students, wherever they are in terms of fluency or literacy, that is what I'm exploring in the major and minor behavioral objectives. So if they are in just the speaking, the babbling stage of whatever concepts we're learning, they're exploring. If they are learning about the notation, the theory behind it, then they're discovering. And if they are combining that babbling with the information of literacy, they are practicing informed exploration with that literacy component. So major and minor behavioral objectives is how I explore different concepts in my classroom, particularly when it comes to rhythmic and melodic concepts, I guess. So it's just like whatever rhythm you're working with, whatever melody you're working with, whatever formal element you're working on, is just your focus. And your major behavioral objective is going to be reflected in the student I can statement. So that's going to ground your lessons. that's going to ground your lessons, and everything that happens inside of your lesson is going to be based on that. It's horrifying. Yeah.
Thanks, Anne. And thanks for working through that. That's really awesome. I know also that some people are new to Seesaw, or maybe they're realizing that their kids are also new to it. In my school, some of the classes had a lot of experience with their teachers using Seesaw throughout the school year. So I noticed that they adapted really quickly to the activities that I would post and being able to comment on different posts that kids would make with one another. And the classes that maybe Seesaw was new to them, the responses were a little slower the first week. And I think that that's completely understandable because the students are getting acquainted with something that's new. And we shouldn't be expected to be able to assess them in any way whatsoever when they're working with things that are new for them. Not to mention the inequities that you might be facing in your own school scenarios. But I thought, Victoria, you could maybe talk with us a little bit about if a teacher is new to Seesaw and the kids are new to Seesaw, what might be like a few first steps that they could make to help ease the transition?
Yeah, no, that's great, Matthew. And I agree with everything that you said about that previously as well. Yeah, so we don't learn inside a bubble and we don't teach inside a bubble. So if this is a new platform for you and for your parents and for your colleagues and for your students, it is totally reasonable, like I said earlier, to expect a learning curve with technology. And that is good because we're here to learn. And turns out we have some new lessons to learn that we were not expecting at the beginning of the year. But we can work together to overcome some of those new challenges. In terms of getting started, specifically with home learning, the Seesaw Help website has really detailed guides, step by step. This is what you do first. This is how to send out codes. This is how to get the codes to families who might not have access in these ways. The Seesaw Help website has gone through a lot of detail to support teachers during this time. The other thing that I would say is to make this decision in collaboration with your administration or your technology resource person, if you have one, or the other colleagues in your school. To Matthew's point, this goes a lot easier with students who have support in other areas, not just you. It's also a good way for you to stay connected and stay supported with other colleagues. So to wrap that up, the Seesaw Support website has gone through so much detail in how to help teachers set this up from scratch. When we make these decisions in collaboration, that really helps us have direction and support moving forward.
Absolutely. Thank you, Victoria. So I definitely hope that some teachers try out Seesaw or try out using iMovie and some of the things that we talked about. And maybe you can feel a little more comfortable with it, but also give yourself grace, knowing that mistakes and bumps are going to happen along the way. Someone talked a little bit about why I chose the path that I do to record things. And I know Kate mentioned something about recording directly into iMovie, which is totally possible. I just find that my iPhone has a higher quality with the microphone as well as the video. So that's kind of why I choose that. The nice thing about having both of them as Apple devices is the AirDrop feature is really quick and easy. If you don't have a Mac though, there's another app I would suggest that you can add to an extension to a Google Chrome called Loom, L-O-O-M. I've explored with it a bit and found that it's been really helpful for those of you that might not be able to use iMovie to make movies in a simple way as well. It's just not the path that works for that works with the devices that I have. Amanda also talked about uploading directly into Google Classroom or to Google Drive, which you can. You absolutely can. It just has a limited space. So if you're making tons and tons of videos, you'll start to realize your drive gets full. So that's kind of why I use YouTube. YouTube, I also find uploads quite a bit faster than Google Drive does, but each person might be in their own scenarios. And when you're dealing with copyright, you can, if you just post into your Google Drive and share with the students the link, then it's not anywhere online. And then you are avoiding the copyright issue by not posting it anywhere online. And that's one thing to consider. When you post, you do have to worry about those copyrights if you're posting something online, and my advice would be to err on the side of caution. I do not read an entire book from beginning to end. because that could run into copyright, but you could read portions of it. If you use a song, like I use a recording from Madonna, you might have noticed in one of my days of videos, I just get an email from YouTube that says there's a copyright claim placed on the video, which means that I don't earn any money on the advertisements that play before the video. They earn, or Madonna earns, or her company earns the money, which is fine because I'm not making any money on YouTube anyway. I'm using it as a resource. But you could run into other things as well. And if you're afraid that you might be running into a copyright, then I would not suggest posting it anywhere online, because it's better to be safe than sorry in those scenarios. Well, I know that there were a lot of questions we couldn't get to today, so I encourage all of us to stay connected with one another. The four of us here love working with teachers and fellow music educators, so please follow us, message us, know that we're here for you. Also, stay tuned to what's next. We'd love your feedback on what was helpful and what you want to hear more about, because perhaps there'll be things for us in the future as we continue this discussion. We want to stay connected with you. So please know that this is just the beginning. Tomorrow, you'll receive an email with a link to the recording of this webinar so you can watch it again. You can pass it along to other colleagues and others who may gain insight from the discussion. We'll also be providing all of these slides so you can access everything within it. And there's a number of links that you can click on in the slides as well, so you can review all that information and follow us and connect us at your leisure. Finally, I know I mentioned a moment ago, we welcome any feedback you have to offer, and we're going to provide a platform for you to do so as well. So from the four of us, Karissa, Anne, Victoria, and myself, we just want to thank you for joining us today, and best wishes on your teaching journey in what is definitely an unusual and unique environment for all of us to be exploring. So thanks, everyone. Until next time.